Assalamu alaikum. I am Ahmed Mohammed, the litigation director for the New York chapter of the Council on American-Islamic Relations, the nation's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization. And you are watching Care Talk. And I'm broadcasting out of my living room right here in Queens. Now, this program was created to provide regular updates and resources to the New York Muslim community relating to the COVID-19 crisis. And before we get started with tonight's episode, I want all of our viewers and everyone who's going to be watching in the future to take a moment and to go ahead and follow and like our page so that you can get up-to-date information in the future and to continue to support our organization here in New York State. Now, tonight's episode is the 8th episode of Care Talk, and we will be revisiting a topic that was the subject of our very first episode. That topic, President Trump's coronavirus-related travel bans and how it's affecting citizens abroad. Now, since our first episode, there have been significant developments as the COVID-19 crisis continues to impact society as we know it. And to provide you with an update, tonight's special guest is the former Deputy Director of the Rule of Law Collaborative at the University of South Carolina, a former professor of Islamic law, and a postdoctoral fellow at Stanford Law School's Afghanistan Legal Education Project. And I'm proud to say that he is the new executive director of CARE Alabama. Please welcome tonight's guest, Mr. Hamid Han. Mr. Han, welcome to CARE Talk. Mr. Han, I think you have to unmute yourself so that we can hear the amazing information that you have to share tonight with our viewers. How are you doing tonight, and how's South Carolina?
I'm doing well, thank you. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. Thank you for everyone for having me and providing this opportunity to speak to you about some important issues.
Now, Mr. Han, before we get started, tell all of our viewers, a little bit about your background and where you come from, in the sense that how have you kind of been introduced to the CARE family?
Well, before taking on the position of executive director of the Alabama chapter, I was the deputy director of the Rule of Law Collaborative at the University of South Carolina. And in that role, I led a 5-year cooperative agreement between the university and the State Department to improve the United States worldwide efforts on improving justice sector development, rule of law, and justice systems around the world on a variety of different topics. Prior to my time at the University of South Carolina, I was a senior program officer at the United States Institute of Peace, a federal government institution looking to mitigate conflicts around the world. And there I ran various programs on a variety of different projects, but primarily in the Muslim majority countries. And prior to that, was a advisor for the US government and Stanford Law School in Afghanistan, and have been privileged to work in various capacities at the Department of Justice and in the federal courts, as well as in Congress as well.
That is a lot of work that you've been doing, especially around the Department of State and government. And so you're a great resource for CARE Alabama, the community there, and obviously you're going to be a great resource for the New York Muslim community tonight with the information and insights that you'll be able to share. And really the main purpose that we want to discuss tonight is President Trump's coronavirus-related travel bans. It has stranded a lot of Americans overseas. They are stuck abroad. Before we get into what our Americans who are stuck abroad can do to return back into the United States, let's talk a little bit about what are the coronavirus-related travel bans and what effect are they having?
Well, it's interesting because from our vantage point, we're looking at what the United States has enumerated as its policies around the world. And as we'll get into detail, we'll talk about the various restrictions, which, while they have not changed in dramatic format, what has changed are other countries' responses, both to our own pandemic situation, as well as their own self-interested situation. So we're dealing with perhaps one of the most complicated and challenging situations where countries are restricting interaction, and that type of interaction is leading to a great deal of confusion, both for Americans abroad, but also for other citizens. And so there's a great deal of confusion about what should be done and what citizens, legal permanent residents, and other countries' citizens should and should not be doing.
Oh, I agree with you. A lot of confusion for the citizens abroad. I also have to tell you, there has been a lot of confusion for organizations like ours in terms of what advice we have to give out to our constituents who are asking us. And I'll give an example later on about a case that we've dealt with here in New York and how the dynamics of the crisis have really shifted what we're saying and what advice we're giving to our Americans who are stuck abroad. I want to get into the details real quick. Let's go through which countries has the United States imposed travel bans to, and what are the exceptions?
Well, there are only a limited number of countries that have been specifically identified by the State Department, and they include China, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and then all 26 countries of the European Schengen area. Those are all the countries that have what we would commonly know as the Common Border Agreement within the European Union. They include Austria, Belgium, the Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Italy, Latvia, Liechtenstein, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malta, the Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, and Sweden, as well as Switzerland.
And now
those are all the countries that are bound by a treaty and largely recognized by the European Union.
I will say to all of our viewers, if you are looking for a virtual trivia partner, you know who to contact. I certainly could not have named all those countries like that. I also want to say that after President Trump issued his initial travel ban related to these European countries, a few days later, he also added the United Kingdom and Ireland as well.
That's correct.
And the travel restrictions, essentially dwindle down to that anyone who has been in any of these countries,
that's right,
at any point during the prior 14 days is prohibited from flying into the country. Did I get that correct?
That's correct. 14 days is the window identified by the Department of State. And these are those that are considered to be foreign nationals. So passport holders of those countries. The one carve out, the nexus that is probably most relevant to those in New York and the United States are legal permanent residents, meaning that you hold a passport in one country, but you've now moved towards declaring your nationality being the United States. So that would be the one exception. But barring that, all of these citizens are right now restricted from entry into the United States.
So, right, you mentioned a really good exception to the travel ban. It's that if you're a green card holder,
yes,
and if you're also an American citizen, the ban itself does not apply to you. And of course, there's extra limitation that spouses and close family relatives of U.S. citizens are exempt from this travel ban.
That is correct.
Now, I will say that that's not much of a relief to Americans and green card holders who are stuck abroad, because one of the primary challenges that they have had dating back 3 weeks now is that they can't find flights out of those countries that they're in to be able to come back into the United States.
Right.
And now recently, after a lot of pressure being placed on the Department of State, we have finally seen movement, right, to the United States government helping citizens abroad who are stuck come back into the United States. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Well, the United States signaled its intent to, and it is still stated policy as of today, which is being reiterated by the Department of State, that they are, one, closely monitoring each country's travel restrictions, especially as it pertains to American citizens and legal permanent residents. And secondly, that they will take whatever measures are necessary to secure the security of those Americans who are currently abroad. What that is translated to is twofold. First, keep in mind that on a limited basis, up until last week, the State Department was chartering flights and securing the release of certain individuals in certain countries. Congress stepped in through the stimulus bill known as CARES to provide the State Department with millions of more dollars to actually fund the chartering of flights and allowing Americans to more readily be able to navigate this complicated space. So it is a bit of a challenge at this point because according to State Department policy, each embassy has its own prerogative about what it will do and what it can do with respect to the chartering of those flights. And my understanding from a contact I spoke to at the State Department today is that they are monitoring the situation on a daily basis. And of course, they're a bit removed, like so many of us, from being able to get real time. And there is an information gathering approach that takes time. And unfortunately, that may mean people are at least, or for the long term, stranded.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's always difficult when we're, asking, when we have Americans stuck abroad, especially during a pandemic like this, where there's a lot of fear associated, especially in a foreign country that you're not calling home. So you want to come back to, where you grew up, where you're comfortable, where your family is at. I do want to take this moment, though, to give a quick shout out to our Care Georgia office that did a really impressive job advocating for and securing the return of American students from Georgia, including Muslim students who are in Peru on medical missions, doing rotations through their medical schools after intense pressure put on by Georgia and other organizations. The US government finally, after initially refusing to do so, secured flights for them to come back to the United States. So it is possible if you're stuck abroad to work with CARE, to work with other organizations, to work with your congressmen, your senators, and the Department of State to make sure that you're returned home safely. And so that's kind of what we're here tonight to kind of tell the viewers and make sure that we're giving them the appropriate information. Now, before we go into some of the tips that you may be able to provide, I know that there's also been a tribal advisory that's been issued. I think it's called the Global Level 4 Health Advisory that Department of State issued. Can you tell us about what exactly that means for individuals who want to travel outside the United States?
Well, it is a set of restrictions that have largely been in place really since 9/11 to talk about the worldwide sort of sense about Americans abroad. On a general level, it has always been to regions or countries, and they have largely been based upon general guidelines. This is the first time in US history that they have alerted and reached a level 4 recommendation, which is twofold. One, that Americans should eliminate, and to whatever degree necessary, eliminate all non-essential travel. That means tourism, cultural appropriation, etc. And secondly, an admonishment, which goes to the heart of what has already been mentioned initially. That is that they cannot, the State Department makes an assurance that they can't make guarantees on the safe return or the duration of return of American citizens or legal permanent residents back to the United States. So it comes with a caveat that anyone who does decide to make travel plans and does so, they do so at their peril. And that's quite an admonishment by the State Department that is fairly atypical of what we've seen in the past.
That's really important that you say that, and the Department of State is informing American citizens that if you leave the country, you're on your own. That's the message that's being sent. It's a little frightening. I can't remember a time when the Obama administration or even the Bush administration put out an advisory similar to this. So if you're out there thinking about doing foreign travel, please be wary that you may not be allowed to come back into the country until the public health crisis is gone or is significantly reduced back to a safe level. We're already getting questions on Facebook, and we're going to get to those questions. So continue, please, making the questions in the comments section if you have them. The very next topic we want to go to is, if a citizen is stuck abroad, what should they be doing? How do they get back into the country?
Well, the first thing they should be doing, and this, by the way, goes to the point raised earlier about being your own advocate while abroad. Oftentimes, citizens and legal permanent residents may not capture the attention of the local US Embassy if they do not enroll in the STEP program. And that can be readily done and should be done with respect to any citizen that is traveling to a particular country. Another key area for citizens and LPRs who are abroad is to make use of the social media that that particular embassy has informed. And for example, I know for a fact that in addition to those resources, Twitter is an important resource. The State Department readily uses that as a source of authority. And I know recently, for example, the United States was arranging flights out of Pakistan in light of the pandemic, and they were arranging flights out of the country, but they were alerting citizens, LPRs, both through the STEP program and through social media, in particular Twitter.
Before we go further, I just want to make sure for all of our viewers, the STEP program you're referring to is the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and
that's right. Go ahead.
No, and that's being used right now as a service to, connect U.S. citizens and green card holders with flights back into the United States, if that's possible. And obviously, social media is really important. And contact with the embassy is extremely important during these times.
And it's also, it again goes to help to identify for the relevant embassies the number and where U.S. citizens and LPRs are located within the country, because that informs their strategy. It also informs the State Department's safety protocols to go into effect based upon that dispersion of Americans within a particular country or vicinity.
Now, Mr. Hunt, let me ask you this. How often is it that the embassies or State Department is using Twitter to arrange, official activities, something of this nature? Is that very often, or is this just speaks to the crisis that we're in?
It is unprecedented. You couldn't say it any other way. It is simply unprecedented. And luckily, the State Department has built up its social media presence but it is in many ways gone into overdrive in light of the pandemic. And it also illustrates, by the way, the importance of American citizens and legal permanent residents to take the safekeeping and the precautions necessary to make copies of their passports, to secure them in digital locations as well as physical copies, because depending on the situation and the changing circumstances in a particular country, that can be very difficult. I know, for example, my own college roommate was trapped in Spain, and he was able to leave the country within 24 hours of Spain's enforcement of a shutdown back to the United States. So here we are talking about a Schengen country. We're talking about an American citizen, and unfortunately, he had to fork over an additional $10,000 to secure flights back to the United States. Luckily, he made it back to the United States, but he then subsequently developed symptoms of COVID-19. So these can be very tricky. I think that it's incumbent upon all citizens who are abroad to prepare themselves for a moment's notice and a change in circumstances. And as we're seeing right now, as it's unfolding in various countries, those circumstances are changing. And they can be quite dramatic.
And we hope that your friend, fully recovers quickly, inshallah. I will say, you mentioned earlier, and you mentioned it a couple of times, about the difficulty of coming back into the country and the need to be prepared. Here at the CARE New York, at the onset of the COVID-19 crisis, shortly after President Trump issued his travel coronavirus related bans. And I should say that, the coronavirus related travel bans is separate and apart from the Muslim and African bans that are currently in place. So so in some circumstances, you will be affected by all three bans, and you will have to navigate through all three bans, unfortunately. But at the very early stage, just to give a quick example, we received a phone call and request for assistance from a student who had returned back to the Islamic Republic of Iran to attend a funeral for her grandmother. And obviously she had been in Iran in the past 14 days. This was when it was just a travel ban against China and Iran. And there were countries who were bordering Iran that had already closed their border. For instance, she couldn't go to Turkey to stay for 14 days. She couldn't go to Europe to stay 14 days. And really the question for her became, should I secure a visa elsewhere, stay for 14 days, and then book a flight? Because all the commercial flights had been canceled at that point. And really the advice was extremely difficult. And we had to, luckily, we thought about the situation and how rapidly it was developing, and that leaving the country of Iran at that moment was not the best idea for her, because it would have likely left her stuck in limbo in a third country. For instance, had she gone to Germany, she would have been stuck to the ban, since now Germany is part of a new travel-related ban. And so it has really put families, through tremendous pain and suffering. And for the Americans and the green card holders who are lucky enough to come back into the United States, if they do it through commercial flights, there are restrictions, which makes it extremely more difficult on them. And that there are only 14 international airports now who are allowed to accept flights from one of these countries. Now, luckily for New York's residents, JFK is one of those countries. Now, if you have to if you have to come back into the country, regardless of which method you use, my understanding, and you can talk a little bit more about this, is that whoever comes back into the country is going to have to go into self-quarantine. Is that correct? And for how long?
The restriction, at least the enumerated restriction, and of course, we're talking about self-quarantine. So a lot of this is self-enforced. The United States is not taking steps like, say, Hong Kong, or in other countries where they're literally badging people and restricting them to hotels. The CDC guidelines read into the travel restrictions suggest 14 days. That is still my understanding based on the research I was able to obtain today, that it remains at 14 days of self-quarantine.
Yeah, so the Department of State has followed the CDC guidelines, and according to the rules in place for returning Americans or anyone entering the country, really, is that you have to self-quarantine for 14 days upon your arrival. I want to also just note to our viewers, we traditionally give Know Your Rights material, and what is and is not allowed, what type of questions are allowed. I want all of our viewers to know, since we are an emergency public health crisis, that you will be expected to answer a little bit more in-depth questions than you would normally be prepared for. So questions related to your travel, where have you been, are going to be extremely important. And of course, you should be prepared to have your temperature taken, and questions about your medical your medical history and how you're currently feeling health-wise are going to be extremely vital. Obviously, we advise all travelers to cooperate with the authorities during this health crisis, and to obviously make sure that you do your best. We've seen pictures, we've seen the videos of customs areas being jam-packed of individuals. So if you have the opportunity, please practice social distancing, even when you're trying to go through customs, when you're at the airport. You want to make sure that you're taking CDC guidelines seriously, keeping 6 feet away. If you're coughing, do so to your elbow. And that we or minimizing the amount of risk that you're taking health-wise at the airports. So that's really important. Now,
And just to emphasize another point that's being made is that those CDC guidelines apply anywhere. And there's also discussion being had at the CDC level, but I think it's strongly recommended based on the empirical evidence that we've seen thus far that masks, the individuals who are healthy, there's some controversy about whether it's individuals who are healthy or individuals who are otherwise ill, look for new guidance on masks. I think it's a common feature now on the American landscape, but it might be that much more important as travelers try to simply travel worldwide.
No, absolutely. And everyone should be tuned in to the CDC's website. Make sure to visit it repeatedly, especially if you're traveling, to see if there have been any updates. Make sure to visit the United States Department of State website. Visit your embassy's website if you're able to. Absolutely get signed up to STEP during this crisis. And Twitter is really important. And look, and I think we all understand that we're dealing with crisis that we haven't dealt with in the past, and that when Americans are being locked down in foreign countries, the ability to go to the embassy is removed. And so you have to find a way to communicate. Now, one thing that we do here at CARE is we're really good at communicating, and we're really good at pressuring the authorities when they have done something wrong, or when they have refused to take action when we think they should. The CARE Georgia example is a perfect example of it. So I will tell any American, any green card holder who is stranded abroad, if you live in the state of New York, or if you live anywhere in America, contact CARE, right? Contact CARE National if you live, outside of New York. If you live in New York and you need help, right? You feel like you can't go through this process on your own, or even if you can, but you want that little extra push from a civil rights and advocacy organization, call us. Yes, our office is closed physically because of social distancing, because of a stay-at-home order, because we are keeping our staff and our community safe, and we're practicing social distancing. That's why right now we're broadcasting out of my living room, right? But we still have internet. We do our work as if nothing has changed because we're live on the web, and we're meeting remote. And actually, sadly, not sadly, I'm not really sure which one to say here, but our work has gone up, right? I'm doing more work hours than I did previously. So if you're stranded abroad, if you have a family member abroad and they need help, you got to call us. And our number is really easy, right? It's 646-665-7599. Call us, leave a message, we'll get it. Email us, right? If you have a legal issue and you need assistance, send us an email and let us know what it is, and we'll get in touch with you, right? Our email address is legal@ny.cair.com, or you can go to our website, care-ny.org, right? And you want to report an incident, and you put all the information there, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Now, the other thing I want to also say is that, we mentioned the embassies. We mentioned getting in touch with your embassies, right? There's a lot of individuals in this country, and I know one of our clients has been affected as well, is that they were in the process of getting a visa. Right? My understanding is that the Department of State has temporarily suspended all routine visa issuance, all appointments as of March 20th. Do you know how long that will continue?
At this point, it is simply unclear. Given the situation here in the United States, given the constraints that is placing upon the US government, I would say that would last for the foreseeable future. I do know that American government officials are under the same sort of restrictions on social distancing. It makes their work very challenging, however, because much of the work that they're doing is classified and it has to go through a various process. And we are seeing, frankly, inconsistency in terms of the ability to work, the ability to access that secure information. So I would strongly urge that everyone take another degree of patience under the circumstances. If we weren't patient enough with what everything was going on, if things weren't challenging enough, as it were, right now, my understanding from the federal government perspective is that they are up and operating, but that they are under a great deal of constraint that they've never quite seen before.
No, absolutely. Look, I also want to take this moment that for anyone who is stuck abroad, we have a phone number that they can use to contact a consular emergency hotline. So if you're in the United States and you're calling about a family member who's stuck abroad, that number is going to be 188. I'm sorry, let me start over. It's 1-888-407-4747. If you're outside the United States trying to call this hotline, you should use the 202-501-4444 line. And that'll, try to connect you with an emergency hotline for the consulate in your area. So that's really important. I want to also remind all of our viewers that, we've talked a lot about websites here, and I'm sure that not everybody wrote those down. So what we're going to do in the comments section is provide the links that we've discussed here tonight during this episode in the comments section that you can go to and review later on. Also, all of the information that we've discussed here is on our website. That's carenewyork.org. There is a COVID-19 resources page that includes everything related to the coronavirus related travel bans. So it's really important that if you misremember or have forgotten some of the information we discussed here, that you have a place to go and view it. I will also ask all of our viewers to please like this video, share it with your family and friends, with your community, and make sure that it gets to the individuals who need it. This is really important information. It could be an issue of life or death here, and we're trying to get American citizens and green card holders, American nationals back into the country, back with their families, and keep them safe. Now, Mr. Han, are you excited to be the new executive director of CARE Alabama? I'll put you on the spot.
I would say that I am both excited, humbled, and quite intimidated. CARE New York has demonstrated that has set a very high bar, and I only hope to be able to come ever so close to that bar.
Well, we're excited to have you. I've known you for a bit now, so I'm really excited, and I think CARE Alabama is getting a heck of a leader. You're going to make a great impact there. And obviously, I can never cheer for your football teams, but that's okay. We can still be a family, right? There's always got
to be a family, right? We'll still have disagreements like any good Muslim family will have those strident disagreements. And, I have to say begrudgingly that I was cheering on your alma mater because you have some pretty spectacular players and they demonstrated real decency in helping their community. So to them, I salute them.
Thank you so much.
May not cheer for them, but they have my respect.
That's all we ask for. And for the viewers who are interested, my alma mater is Louisiana State University. Go Tigers. Now, I think we have one last question. And if anybody's out there watching right now, if you have any last questions, if you have a burning desire to ask a question, this is the moment to do it. Don't miss this opportunity. We have an amazing intellect with us here tonight who is bringing insight from his work from the Department of State, give us answers and guidance. So please do so. Write your questions so we can get it answered right now. The last question we have that I see right now, and this kind of looks like probably a prediction from you, is that if someone wants to come back in the country, what is the timeline that they should expect in terms of the moment they reach out to the State Department to when they could expect to be back in the country?
Well, to be totally upfront with you, I think it depends on the country. We are seeing that while the coronavirus has taken real lethal hold here at home, countries throughout Europe are really undergoing enormous stress. We know that the numbers in Spain and of course in places like Germany and Italy are tremendous. Numbers are, however, even becoming alarming in places like Switzerland. So I think that the situation is quite difficult, but consider that there may be the ability to travel more readily for countries in Europe. I do, however, urge a greater degree of patience with regard to countries in the Middle East and South Asia. They are highly unpredictable because, on one hand, as I mentioned before and has been emphasized, they have their own restrictions. And some countries are now restricting the United States. So it's a very complicated maze. And this is precisely why take advantage of reaching out to your CARE chapter, to CARE National, both with respect to your needs and to try to help get assistance, because in many respects, we can either identify an answer for you, we can lead you in the right direction, but I think all of us collectively need to have patience with the process, because global travel, as a general matter, has dropped by 92%. And that number is probably going to only get more and more difficult in the days and time to come. And I would also suggest that looking on the horizon, based on the individuals I spoke to today at the State Department, global travel could be heavily restricted for not only the few weeks that we're talking about here in the United States, but probably for the duration of the rest of the year, given the path of the virus and the efforts done by countries at various levels. It's a real patchwork out there.
Now, Mr. Hahn, we're just about ending of time here in this program for this episode. I want to give you one last opportunity for your parting words, and I don't want you to center it around this specific issue. Is that for Muslims around the world who are American citizens, who are green card holders, who wish to come back into the country, but they are not in a country that currently has a travel ban, and the coronavirus pandemic may not have reached that area yet. For those individuals, what is your advice for them?
My advice in no uncertain terms is get home and get home fast. The reason why I say this is because so much of what we talk about in terms of the reach of the virus depends on the same circumstances that we are facing here in the United States, whether testing has been done, whether the preventative measures for controlling pandemics are in place in those countries. And of course, whether even social distancing can even be a reality in the country that you are talking about. So I think it's highly incumbent upon every American and every legal permanent resident and those within that class of individuals, wherever you are, to be highly vigilant about the changing circumstances. And frankly, in my opinion, and I have family who are abroad currently, I have strongly encouraged them in no uncertain terms to come home. So I'd say this raising the alarm, but I also think we are facing some alarming circumstances, and I want everyone to be safe. I want everybody to be prepared, and I want them to make sure that they're taking every precaution necessary for the health and safety, but also for the benefit of their own families.
Well, there you have it, America. If you're overseas and you want to come home, you got to do it now. Do not wait until a pandemic hits your country that you're at right now overseas. Do not wait. Take the opportunity to fly back while commercial flights are still available, and be here in the United States if that's what you want at the end of the day, to be here in the United States with your family, and to be with them and to be safe. Now, I want to just recap really quickly for everyone who's out there. Tonight's episode has been about the coronavirus-related travel bans and what Americans can do if they are stuck abroad. And so if you're watching this, if you're an American stuck abroad watching this, if you're an American who has a family member who is stuck abroad, We really implore you, number one, to sign up for the STEP program. Go to the STEP website, which will be added to the comment section here. Sign up for that program, get in touch with the embassy, go on social media, follow the embassy of your country, and start communicating with them. The other thing I would ask everyone who's watching here is to contact your CARE chapter. Contact CARE New York. We will move heaven and earth and do everything that we can to bring you back here and to reunite you with your family. That means that we will talk to your congressmen and congresswomen. That means we will talk to your senators. That means we will communicate on your behalf with the Department of State. And we will do everything in our power to make sure that you have the best ability possible to come back into this country. But we need you to take that first step. And that first step is contacting our office. Go to our website, cair-ny.org. Contact us via email at legal@ny.care.com, or you can call us and leave a voicemail and someone will get back to you. And that number is 646-665-7599. Mr. Khan, thank you so much for being our special guest. I hope that all of our viewers go to the CARE Alabama Facebook page and follow that page, because I know there's going to be great things to come. So thank you for being here with us tonight. And I want to thank our viewers for tuning in for the 8th episode of CARE Talk. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you.